As Dr. Lawless indicates, I am the Dean of the School of Education at the University of Redlands, and on behalf of the school, the University of Redlands, and the Center for Educational Justice, I would like to welcome you to what has become a tradition for our summer event. We've been doing the summer event for 17 years now, and the Superintendents Forum is a marquee event of the summer conference. Dr. Lawless has for so many years provided the avenue for us to gather our Southern California district leaders to reflect on various topics that affect us all. Topics, though, that have a common thread of influence that either strengthen or challenge justice and equity in education. Your participation in this event means we take joint responsibility for the social, cultural, and educational well-being of our communities, our families, and most importantly, our children and students. The mark of a great university is assuming such shared responsibility. And in the case of a school of education, a shared responsibility in meaningful ways with our school districts, cities, counties, and the entire state of California. Our success in elevating justice and equity, our success in strengthening the social, cultural, and educational well-being of our communities, families, and children will only happen through our partnership with you. It will only happen when we can, to some degree, identify common issues, common definitions, and collaborative actions. It will only happen when the CEJ and the School of Education listen to the issues that are a priority for you so that we may reflect those issues in our teaching, our scholarship, and our service throughout the communities that we serve. Finally, as the Dean of the School of Education, I want to affirm to you our commitment to justice and equity. Our newly and collaboratively adapted vision is to inspire justice-related dialogue and action. The Superintendents Forum that you are here for today is squarely within that vision. I am thankful for each and every one of you for your presence today and those of you in the audience. We are so appreciative of the time each of our panelists has taken to help us to continually focus our vision for tomorrow while pragmatically and realistically, but with strength, addressing the issues of today. I look forward to working with all of you in the months ahead as we partner together to confront our challenges and claim our strengths. And now, without further ado, I hand it back to Dr. Lawless, who will moderate our discussion. Thank you, Dr. Lawless.
All right. Thank you, Dean Martinez. At this moment, I think we should start with our opening speakers and opening remarks. And they are really represented by the county through the office of Dr. Gomez. And then representing a big district is Corona Norco, which is Dr. Sunburn Rostra's school district. And representing a relatively smaller district is Julie Vitale, Oceanside Unified School District. So with that, and after the voices of the superintendents are heard, all these representative superintendents, then we're offering you 3 small talks, but bigger in impact in terms of Dr. Charez, Dr. Estricuerda, and Dr. Ambrosia's issues. And so we will do that. All right, Dr. Gomez, are you ready to give your featured opening remarks?
Yes, I am. Thank you, Dr. Lawless, and thank you for that introduction, and good afternoon to everyone. I'm so honored to be part of this Education Justice Forum, where these conversations are so much needed in this day and age where we're dealing with so many educational disparities. As we all know, many school districts and communities across our county are experiencing a move to raising awareness of equity issues with a particular emphasis on racial equity. The long-term impact of race and racism on student achievement, how instruction is delivered, how discipline is being implemented, resource allocation, et cetera, is being discussed and debated at all levels in our communities. I think this is a very, very hot topic. When you think about CRT, when you think about anti-racism, this is a topic of conversation that is being spoken about across our country. For me, I think when I think about the work of equity, it's so very important for all of us, right? To go from a lens of theory to practice. And I think at the end of the day, we're all practitioners and we want to take action and we want things to happen. And for me, I can't think of any focus more important than how student achievement is being impacted except through the area of literacy. And today I've been asked to address the topic of equity and educational access. Obviously, this is a very broad topic that in my opinion includes areas like language development, early childhood ed, and higher education. And at the Riverside County Office of Education, we have an all-star team of educators who are focused on every single one of these topics to support student achievement. So for our purposes today, I want to talk about educational equity and access as it relates to our RCOE pledge, which states all students deserve to have access to a high-quality education to ensure that they're academically and socially prepared for college, the workforce, and civic responsibility. So the question that comes to mind is, what does true equity and access look like? What does equity mean for the 430,000 students in Riverside County? And I believe that it begins with the most foundational piece in education, which is literacy, the ability for kids to read at high levels of proficiency. Before there can be a focus on content areas, before kids can really grasp and embrace college and career readiness and graduation rates, the key and the seed to unlocking every other content area is the ability to learn to read. Having that automaticity, having the vocabulary, having the ability to decode, and having those high levels of comprehension in the area of reading. So many educators, all of you are very familiar with this adage: students should learn to read by third grade, and after third grade, students should be reading to learn. I think the issue with that is right now, especially as we're still navigating through a very difficult pandemic, we understand that the academic regression of our students is very, very grave. We know that opportunity gaps have only widened, achievement gaps have widened. And so once again, the ability for kids to gain mastery, especially our primary grade students in the area of literacy, is so very important. And at the Riverside County Office of Education, one of the 4 initiatives that we're focusing on is literacy by 5th grade. This doesn't mean that we're giving up on teaching mastery by 3rd grade, but what it means is that we're focused on students entering middle school and high school with the intent of becoming confident readers. And the hope is that they're not struggling in middle school or high school. Just imagine students who are academically behind in middle school and who may have challenges catching up become more susceptible to dropping out from school, which is the antithesis of what we want. So we want from a very early age to meet the needs of students in the area of literacy. And this includes ensuring that many young children as possible have access to high quality preschool education, no matter their zip code or income level. And this also includes furthering dual language immersion programs that are based on what we already know about how the brains of young children work. As we all know, children have the innate ability to learn to read, write, and speak in multiple languages. And it's imperative to capitalize on those opportunities for kids to read and learn as many languages as possible in their lives. Now, as I'm starting to wind down, we know that the learning loss this past year has been a very serious challenge. And so it's critically important that we focus on providing educators with the appropriate professional development to teach reading and provide that customary or customized support in literacy for science and math and history and social studies and writing initiatives and more. At the county level, we have developed reading foundation resources, sample literacy and language lessons, and we're doing these trainings for teachers to support all students, specifically, of course, those areas where kids like English language learners have more propensities for academic growth, to provide them the tools to incorporate literacy in all curriculum areas. So I'm just going to list a couple of things that we're doing at the county office, which I think are powerful, which I think are really helping us in meeting the needs of students. So just to name a few, we're working with the California Department of Education in a grant titled Read to Me, Any Stage, Any Age initiative involving 8 of our districts, which are fostering that school to home literacy connection. Also, we cultivated a partnership with the Cesar Chavez Foundation, which is providing hundreds of students with extended summer learning opportunities and providing them free books, especially multicultural books, to really foster that love of reading. Also, we're excited to be in the planning stages of rolling out a program called Vision to Learn. This is a program which will provide free eye exams and classes to students in Riverside County. And so as the months go by, we'll definitely be sure to apprise everyone of our progress in these areas. Now, as I'm winding down this afternoon, I just want to restate what the research shows. It shows basically that children who are routinely read to day in and day out, and who are exposed to constant reading, most definitely thrive in the area of academia and learning. And those children that are not exposed to literacy, unfortunately, they, as the research shows, will face tougher learning challenges in school and beyond. That's why for us at RCOE, it is our moral imperative that when we think about equity, to really address that issue of literacy. And one of my concluding thoughts, I'm a big, strong proponent of public libraries. I think in the last few years, with the advent of technology and phones and computers, I think many people have gone away from the power and the resource that public libraries are. I personally think public libraries are a beacon of hope. When you think about the wide array of books and magazines and journals and documentary films and the endless access to digital resources at your local library, I believe libraries have the potential of impacting the lives of young people in the most positive manner. So in conclusion, when we talk about educational access and equity, we need to talk about the importance of literacy. And once again, if students are not able to read at high levels, they're missing opportunities to engage in key content areas. And so our goal is to ensure that all of our students are ready for elementary, middle, high school, and life. And that concludes my conversation for this afternoon.
Thank you, Dr. Gomez. And now representing the biggest district in the Inland Empire, Dr. Samban Rostro. Share us your thoughts, please. We can't hear you.
I was muted. So
Okay.
I appreciate the comments from our county superintendent, Dr. Gomez. He said a lot, but he actually went deep into the literacy, which is such a, as he mentioned so eloquently, such a critical piece, and it really does start there with the literacy piece. So thank you, Dr. Gomez. Well, I'll try to keep the focus here. When we look at the kind of a broad spectrum of challenges, there's a lot. There's certainly the achievement gap that Dr. Gomez talked about, the access, the equity piece, the mental health piece is something that we are all dealing with as well. But I think recently, as it's already been said, when we're looking at equity in education and social justice, this at least I'll speak to our community here, and you know, one of the things that I really like about our community is the diversity. But diversity does bring some challenges, especially with broad opinions. This whole piece of CRT and has I think can be a huge distraction for the important work that needs to be done, because we're still in the pandemic. So a couple of things that we've done here is really develop a new strategic plan for the next 5 years. Really looking forward to that. A huge component of that strategic plan is the inclusion piece, the equity piece, and the diversity piece. But certainly in a community like this, and like all of our communities, that there's variances, but CRT has been a distraction for us personally. And it's something that we have, it's been a challenge, and hopefully this coming month in August, we'll be able to kind of put that to rest and continue to inform our parents and educate our parents and our community folks, because the reality is that at the K through 12 system, just like across the country, we don't teach CRT directly in our curriculum. Obviously, looking forward to the ethnic studies that's coming around the corner. But that timing with those pieces, along with the divisiveness that's out there, and obviously also living during the pandemic, does create some challenges for all of us. So anyhow, it's kind of a broad stroke, but I'll jump in with other topics as we go along.
Good. All right. Thank you. And of course, Dr. Julie Vitale, we want to hear from you. And thank you again for agreeing to be part of the conversation.
It's my pleasure, Dr. Lawless. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
All right, outstanding. So thank you so much for inviting me, and I'm proud to represent San Diego County and Oceanside Unified School District and be part of this panel once again. And welcome to everyone that's here and some old friends. It's nice to see you all. So one thing, Dr. Lawless, that you asked me to speak of was some of the services that we provided during the pandemic. As we all know, it was a very, very challenging time. And what I was most overwhelmed by is everyone's ability to pitch in where needed and do whatever was needed whenever it was needed. And our staff really did that: administrative, classified, certificated. And there were just some beautiful outcomes, and I think some services that we provided in Oceanside that were I think some of them were unique. I know that districts around the state and the country pivoted quickly to provide online learning, to provide packets to kids almost overnight, to not let a day go by where they didn't have access to curriculum. And I know those are things that many of us did. And the meal service that we were able to provide to students instantly in a drive-through methodology, I was really heartened by our nutrition service workers and what they were able to accomplish literally from a Friday to a Monday to ensure the safety of our community as well as our staff. And it didn't stop there. We continued to provide meals on weekends and on holidays, and to some folks who were not able to get to our drive-through system. Our transportation services coordinated with nutrition services to deliver meals directly to homes to over 70 households, which again, nobody asked them to do that. They saw the need and they filled the need. One area where we really provided services that I thought we really pivoted well was in the area of mental health services. And so I want to share some of those. One of the things is we know that we collectively experienced this pandemic, but depending on our socioeconomic status, really it is the reality of how we experienced the pandemic and what kinds of resources we had access to. So we have several partnerships in the district, and one of those partnerships is with an organization called Wellness Together. And this is where we provide mental health specialists. We had 4 last year. We're increasing it to 6 this year, who can work directly with our secondary students. And these are licensed marriage family therapists and also social workers that can provide really that tier 2 support to our students and to our families. There's also another organization we partner with called Palomar Family Counseling, and this is for K-12 support to our students who are experiencing issues and need that direct therapy and direct one-to-one attention that can really be offered by a therapist. And that's really a tier 2 approach that we have. Our elementary counselors are essentially our tier 1 approach. And throughout the pandemic, they were providing our virtual social emotional lessons to students in K-5, in our K-5 scenario, and also one-to-one support. And we also had a protocol for students who were in crisis. And this was so successful and so valued by the community. We're now expanding our elementary counselors. They were just 1 per 2 schools, and now we are expanding that to 1 at every single elementary school. And we think this is going to provide an amazing social emotional complete K-12 system in the district. And we're very proud to be able to do that through our LCAP funds. We also have another organization that we partner with that does just incredible work. They're called Transformation Consultants, and they're located here in San Diego County, but really they're located in Oceanside. And this is a long-standing partnership between the district and this group. And literally, these are community members that have come together to decide that they want to make a positive impact locally here in Oceanside. And they do that in several different ways. And I've seen the power of these relationships, and I've seen them firsthand over the last couple of years. But last year, they really stepped up to the plate. They assisted our assistant principals and our student services departments and conducted over 1,000 home visits. to students who either stopped coming to school or didn't feel safe coming to school, or for some reason thought that they didn't need to go to school. They made and assisted with those home visits, which let kids know that we care about them, we want them in our schools, and we want them connected. And if they weren't home, we left a little welcome message on their door saying, hey, come back, call us, we want you to be in school. They also helped deliver devices to students. We provided over 6,000 devices. We were not a one-to-one district before the pandemic. Now we are. We're very proud of that. But we delivered devices to homes. We delivered hotspots to over 750 households to make sure that kids had the connectivity. This group also helped deliver meals. When people experienced illness or loss due to death or other situations, they made sure that they responded to the needs of the households. If they needed bills paid, they paid their bills. If they needed groceries delivered, they delivered groceries. They're just that frontline, hands-on organization. They also run camps on the weekends and on school breaks to give kids activities to positively engage. And they mentor students. They take a special interest in students, whether they're struggling or just having some temporary difficulties or ongoing. They reflect our student body, and they want to mentor our students, and they have incredible relationships with our kids. And then, of course, Pass AmeriCorps is an organization that many of us have access to, and we partner with them. And again, we have over 14 Pass AmeriCorps consultants that help us with Tier 2 interventions. And then Care Salas, which is something that, again, is a service provided. We did contract with them, and what they do is they provide a 24/7 concierge service that if someone needs access to social services and they don't know how to get access, they call this number, and depending on their economic situation, their insurance situation, their geographical situation, their transportation situation, they help them get access to the care that they need. So those are some of the things that we really provided that I thought that we responded to a unique challenge in our community. And I would love to talk all about the equity work that we're doing in Oceanside as well, Dr. Lawless, when that time comes around. But I know you have other speakers you want to get to. So again, thanks for letting us share the work that we did here in Oceanside.
Very good. Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Vitale. Those are the best practice efforts that exist right now during the pandemic and will continue to happen. And at this moment, we are presenting 3 of the work of our faculty and students here at the University of Redlands, which I think fit in well with the narrative that is going on around our region. We have, of course, Dr. Brian Charest and his new book on civic literacy, revitalizing our democracy. And we have Dr. Striquerda, who worked on the area of hope and in transforming educational inequities, and Nathan Ambrosia, Dr. Ambrosia, who worked on trauma-based practices in school as a form of equity practice. So hopefully those theoretical narratives will fit in with the best practice, and that's how we do it here at the University of Redlands through this institute, because we featured so many experts here, from Dr. Banks on multicultural education, on critical pedagogy, critical literacy, Donaldo Macedo, Gloria Latson-Billings on critical race theory some years ago, Tyrone Howard from UCLA, who talks about race and culture and its impact on academic achievement, and of course, Jean Anion, urban education, and this morning we just had Patrick Kaman Yang, who worked on not only on critical pedagogy and critical literacy, but also on humanizing curriculum, which really connect with social emotional. And also he cited some powerful research on health science research, which really connects well with education in the area of social and emotional. So with that, let me present to you my colleague, Brian Charest, who will speak about civic literacy and revitalizing democracy.
All
Dr.
right.
Charest.
Thank you so much. Did everybody hear me okay out there? Great. So I've been asked to provide some opening remarks this afternoon. So my brief talk today is called Reflections on building a strong democracy in inequitable times. So I want to start off today with the following statement. As a settler scholar, I acknowledge and honor the original and continued caretakers of the Redlands area, the Serrano and Cahuilla peoples. So thanks again for being here today. Thank you to Dean Martinez, Professor Lawless, and Dr. Strickwerda at the Center for Educational Justice for inviting me. And of course, thank you to Maria Williams and Kristen Grammer and the rest of the organizing committee for putting this entire event together today. So as Jose noted, I have a new book out. I actually read an excerpt of that book at the last time this forum was in person. Some of you may remember that. I dropped a note in the chat if you would like to get a discount on a copy. I'll be talking about the book more today at 3 o'clock, and I hope you can join me for that conversation. For now, though, I wanted to share some initial thoughts to help us frame this forum as we think about the coming school year. This moment, what we might call the era of the global COVID pandemic, has highlighted the persistent racial and economic inequities in our society and across the globe. It's also created possibility for new opportunities. And I would like to argue that this is a pivotal moment for our democracy. So I'll start by asking a question, and then I'll offer 3 ideas that might help us to map a way forward to address the challenges we face as we strive to bring our ideals of a strong democracy and an equitable world to life in our schools and society. As educators, we're often asked the following question: what is the appropriate role of our public schools in an open and free democracy? And whether we are intentionally trying to answer this question or not, our work, that is what we do each day in our schools, is really our answer to this question. And while I think this is an important idea for us to reflect upon, I want to ask you all today to consider this question in a different way. I want you to say, rather than considering the role of our schools in a democracy, can we begin today by asking, what is the role of democracy in our schools, and by extension, in our communities? So, as you know, ideas as well as symbols of democracy are everywhere, both in our schools and in our society. Students in our schools learn about the founding of our democracy, they're taught the Pledge of Allegiance, and about the electoral process, and about our democratic ideals. But how often do we take the time to reflect on the idea of democracy as a practice in our schools? I'm interested today not only in what our experience has been with the idea of democracy in our schools, but also how inequity and exclusion in our society has historically shaped our understanding of democracy, and how it continues to shape our ability or our inability to participate in decision-making processes. So even if we don't see ourselves as the most privileged in our communities, most of us here today are part of a privileged minority who get to make decisions and help shape the spaces where we live and work. But as a privileged minority making decisions for the majority, the way we imagine a healthy democracy? Another way to think about this problem is to ask, do we believe that the more people participate, the better the democracy? And if so, we might consider what is being done today across our country to intentionally make our democracy a place that is less open, less free, and with less access. What happened to the shared idea of an inclusive process of power sharing and self-rule? Did we ever have such a thing across our society? And who, we might ask, gets to be included in this process today and who does not? So I ask you to take some time today to reflect on why more of our neighbors are not involved in making the decisions that often directly affect their lives. In other words, who counts as the people in a democracy, and how can we open up our institutions to be more democratic and include the voices of those who are the most marginalized among us? As we think about the relationship between democracy and equity, I offer 3 propositions I consider much needed or essential features of a healthy democracy. So number 1 is experience with democratic practices. Can we create opportunities in our schools for teachers, students, staff, and community members to participate more directly in democratic decision-making? And if so, what might our schools look like? In particular, our students need the chance to practice democracy as a central part of their experience in schools if we hope for them to be engaged and enlightened citizens. Number 2, expanding our democracy, our idea of democracy. Can we make democracy a permanent feature of our life and work beyond electoral politics? That is, can we imagine a world where people participate in democratic self-government in not just political, but also educational, economic, and social spaces? And number 3, a recognition of the contradictions and challenges ahead. So we need to recognize and we need to teach the fact that our democracy has never been fully inclusive or fully democratic, but we can still strive to make it so. We need to see democracy as an ongoing process of struggle, searching, and revision, where the work is always incomplete. And our students need to learn about the origins of democracy, a democracy that excluded women, indigenous, poor people, enslaved peoples, certain immigrants, people of color, etc., in order to wrestle with these historical contradictions and the ongoing struggles for racial and social equality. The task of education in a democratic society, I would argue, is to teach these truths with all of their complexities. Each of us is in a position right now to help set a new agenda for our schools and communities as we move toward the coming school year. Can those of us here imagine a future of schooling that places democratic practices at the center? That is, can we rebuild our schools on the ideals of liberation, cooperation, and justice, where we measure our progress based not on how well we serve the most well-off in our society, but rather on how well our systems work for the least well-off among us? And I contend that a strong democracy requires a strong educational system, but both require a people who are free from economic insecurity. Some years ago, President Roosevelt so wisely said this about our democracy in one of his fireside chats. He said, "We have come to a clear realization of the fact that true individual freedom cannot exist without economic security and independence. We cannot be content, no matter how high that standard of living may be, if some fraction of our people, whether it be 1/3 or 1/5 or 1/10, is ill-fed, ill-clothed, ill-housed, and insecure." This means expanding our notions of democracy to all aspects of our lives, and schools would be a great place to begin this work. Thank you so much for your time today, and I hope to see you all later this afternoon.
Thank you, Dr. Charest, my colleague Brian, for that input on democracy, and it involves participatory and inclusive democracy from the book that I've been reading, and it's a wonderful book. All right, Dr. Striquerda, would you like to share us your thought?
Yes, thank you. So during the pandemic, Dr. Lawless and I actually took on the task of writing a book, and we did it together as editors, and we invited many people from the university, and even Dr. Kaman Yang, who presented this morning, and Dr. Tyrone Howard to contribute. Dr. Charest wrote a chapter in that, and it actually just got released. I had put the in the chat earlier the link to it. I'm gonna put here, this one is gonna show like the book contents, and it's just kind of really timely because we were thinking about writing this book for a while. Dr. Lawless and I actually went to Ted Alejandre's speech right before the pandemic, right before the shutdown, and he was doing this really good like state of the address about San Bernardino County, right? And when we were sitting there, we left that meeting talking about how we really need to mind the margins. And so that became like a phrase, mind the margins. Who's on the margins? Why are they on the margins? And so this whole notion of marginalized students. And so the whole book is dedicated to minding the marginalized students in their various historical, social, and cultural contexts. And so, for example, we have just talk about a couple of the chapters. The first one is all about there's no teaching without true equity. All of Dr. Lawless's work has been from conception, about providing equity to students. But equity is not just a word. It's something that we say all the time in education, but it has different meanings and different connotations depending on one's understanding of it. So we really came up with this framework that we've coined true equity, and how do we provide equity for our students? And it starts by providing hope for them. And that's the work that I did with my dissertation, is really examining the manifestations of hope in teachers' pedagogical practices, but also in their paradigm. And what we come to find in education is the way that we think, right? Our mindset and the way that we view the world impacts our pedagogical practices in the classroom. So if we look at students who come from certain areas, right, with lower expectations because we have this deficit mindset view for whatever reasons, our pedagogy is going to be connected. Those are inseparable. And I worked in San Bernardino City for a long time. I'm actually back here in San Bernardino City, opening a brand new school. And the thing that hit me and struck me the most when I came to San Bernardino was what I saw in students was what I coined to be the hope gap. Like, they would come into classroom already believing that they could not achieve. It was, things were too hard, or they couldn't do it, or all of those were internalized. And the talk that Dr. Kaman Yang had this morning about how those are actually manifestations of the systemic processes that are happening institutionally within that society, right? And so there's this process where the way that education is happening and the way that we are providing those pedagogical practices are being internalized by the students, and is just increasing this lack of belief that they can achieve. And so that was like my mantra. I did not want my students to leave my classroom feeling that they did not believe that they could be successful in whatever they wanted to do. And so closing the hope gap is something that I feel like is my purpose, whether I'm an administrator or I'm a teacher or I'm a mother, right? That's something I need to always instill hope in those around me and my students and my staff, and help to build that. And it really begins with those loving relationships, because kind of what Dr. Gomez was saying is that we are scholar practitioners. We have all of this theory, we have all of this frameworks, but how do we cross that over to application where we're making those real life connections with people and students, and cross over to, yes, I care about you, but let me go beyond just caring about you. Let me be an agent in your life to help to move you towards meeting your potential. And so I wrote a chapter in this book about educators as agents of hope, and it's really dedicated to Dr. Lawless, actually, because he has been the agent of hope in my life. So, I mean, we come to a point in our life where, we've been successful, but that's not how we always were. I mean, we're mature adults that are helping and working and leaders in education, but that's not where we came from, right? I mean, that's not where I came from. And it was a long process to be able to get there. And so I write about that, and just the importance of having somebody in your life who mentors you or helps you or builds that loving connection relationships that makes it possible for you to even believe that you can be successful yourself. And there's so many students and people in our lives that need that. So that's kind of the closing chapter of the book. But anyways, I put the link in the chat if you guys are interested. It's meant to be a transformational encouragement for all people, no matter what your position is, and to meet the needs of different students. So there's a chapter on foster youth. There's a chapter on English language learners. We wrote a very strong chapter of viewing language as property, which is connected to whiteness as property. But when you're talking about English language development, Dr. Lawless and I really believe that there's a whole separate property value there as far as capitalism's approach with your ability to speak English here in America. And then I know that Dr. Ambrosia has much to say on this connection to hope and trauma and stuff, so I'm going to pass it on to him.
All right, there we go, Dr. Ambrosia.
Awesome. Can you guys hear me okay? All right. Well, thank you for having me. So today I am going to discuss trauma-informed care as an equity approach. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to discuss some examples of trauma to really highlight some of the experiences that our students go through on an everyday basis, especially, coming back after this pandemic. So I would say from about elementary school till about my senior year of high school, I've been exposed to domestic violence. My father was an avid drug user, and when he would be under the influence, he would get really, really abusive with my mother to the point where she almost lost her life, right? I've dealt with eviction. I've been evicted from 2 to 3 homes in my lifetime because, when my father was incarcerated and ultimately got deported back to the Philippines, my mother had a very difficult time because my father was the breadwinner. So we got evicted here from time to time. I've experienced homelessness. Me, my two younger siblings, and my mom, we all lived in a car for about a year, right? And, as a young man, having your father incarcerated and not having that male role model in your life, that was devastating for me. And because my mom couldn't make ends meet for a long period of time, I actually had to be separated from my mother so that we can get our basic needs met as far as food, shelter, all those things. So those were kind of the experiences that I dealt throughout my entire educational career, right? And some of the feelings that I felt during those times is I felt scared, right? I felt abandoned by my father leaving me, or when I had to be separated from my mother, I felt abandoned. I felt anxious, I felt sad. I felt hopeless. When you live in that kind of lifestyle, you feel like that's the reality that you cannot get out of. So you feel that sense of hopelessness. But I think the one emotion that everyone saw, despite all of those feelings that I was feeling, was anger, right? I lashed out at my family. I lashed out at my mom. I lashed out at my peers and at my teachers. And when you think about it, I didn't know this. And when we talk about social emotional learning and equity, I didn't have equal access to resources to help me become successful. When I would see my peers that lived in a two-parent home and they were able to teach them the things that we take for granted, like learning how to ask for help or learning how to start a conversation, how to give a compliment appropriately. These are things that I didn't know. And when I didn't know to do something, or when I was frustrated with something, I would just display anger. And when I showed that behavior in the classroom, I got punishment for that, right? I got out of class suspension or detention. And those things didn't do me a service, right? When I reflect back at that, I wish they would have approached the way they treated me differently. And this is where we can really utilize a trauma-informed care approach, especially for all of our students and families that are coming through this tumultuous time, right? What is trauma-informed care, right? We have to be critically conscious. And what does that mean, critically conscious? We have to be critically reflective and critically aware of not only the problems that surround us, but also the problems that surround the students that we work with, the families that we work with. And when we're able to gain that sense of reflective and awareness, that's when we can start to develop empathy and compassion, right? And transform the way that we think, so that we can have trusting and building relationships with our families and our students, right? We as educators, we have so many different duties and a laundry list of different things that we do in our everyday job. But when they ask me what the most important part of my job is, it's not those duties. It's the way that I approach those things. If I'm not critically aware or reflective, if I don't have empathy or compassion, if I don't build trusting relationships with my families and my students, that doesn't do a service to them, right? So all of those things are part of a trauma-informed care practice that we have to utilize, especially during this tumultuous time. I know when we see behaviors on the face of it, we can get angry maybe when a student shows behavior, but I'll close by saying this because I probably went over time. I'll close by saying this. Every student has a story behind their behavior. 9 times out of 10, the story behind their behavior won't make you angry. It will break your heart. So just keep that in mind. Some of those behaviors in the classroom, and I'll kind of close by ending it with that.
Wow. Thank you, Nathan, for generously sharing your personal story. We have a lot of kids who are experiencing trauma right now, and I think your story really resonates well with us, especially our school district leaders, so that they may impart that same knowledge to their constituencies. All right. For now, with the theoretical narratives from the university angle, and now we will go ahead with our conversation, and we'll start with our PowerPoint presentation as a guide, but it is really a guide for conversation among ourselves. Dr. Stricorda, are you courageous enough to see if the PowerPoint works?
I'm gonna try to get it open. So go ahead and get it started.
Yeah, we start. Yeah, because the first slide we have is really the introduction of all the courageous superintendents that we have today, and some just canceled at the last minute because of some scheduling. We know how it is. We know how busy superintendents are. So they said, "Hey, that's fine. That's good." And so we're so happy that Dr. Vitale, Alan, Edwin, Jennifer, and Sam and Mike McCormick could stay and have this wonderful conversation with us. And we prepared some that you can share with the audience in terms of your responses and messages to us and words of wisdom. And they're all captured in a little PowerPoint that we have. But for now, the first question we have is, are you ready? Is your district ready to reopen in the fall? And alongside with that is the question that says, what are some of the critical issues that you believe your school community is facing? Who are the most affected by these issues? And how would you find the solutions? I'm sure there's a lot of issues that you can, think about and talk about. And so maybe if we can go around and you can share one or two of your equity-driven decisions that you've made in the past, that'll be great. And maybe Mike McCormick can start because I see him right here on my screen.
Thank you, Dr. Lawless. And thanks to everybody being here today and setting this up. And I loved hearing perspectives from the university partners. So thank you very much for that. And thank you for your vulnerability too. One of the things that we're really thinking about in terms of our re-entry is to focus our early entrance, first couple of weeks of school, really around student wellness and reconnecting. We absolutely want to create a culture on our school campuses and in our classrooms where our students feel psychologically safe, they feel valued, and they're making a connection with not only their peers, but the adults that are there to support them. And so I think that's significant in terms of social emotional learning and just kind of managing this re-entry back into a face-to-face environment. It took us a while to get used to transitioning to the virtual world that we're pretty comfortable in now. But we're now going to walk backwards down that path, so to speak. And we need to kind of remind ourselves and support one another in becoming more comfortable in those face-to-face interactions with one another. So, Dr. Lawless, that'll be one thing we're focusing on, and I think we're ready.
Good. Mike McCormick is the superintendent of Valverde Unified School District. Thank you, Mike. Sam's on my screen. So, Dr. Ben Rostro.
Yeah, I'm going to piggyback I'm just checking that I'm on here. I'm going to piggyback a little bit on what Mike said. The trauma-informed practices, for the first time ever, it's also something that Nathan had mentioned. We have staff development for teachers in their social emotional, this trauma-informed practices. We're doing it across the board with all close to 3,000 teachers of ours, because we feel it's so critical that when our students do come back, and by the way, we already have 6 schools that are back that we do year round, 6 of our elementary schools. We do feel that teachers, it's okay. Don't teach the academics. Let's love the kids. Let's let them feel safe. And one thing that we have found, and Mike, you picked up on it, is I saw yesterday in the kindergarten class is even the little kids, the textile, their movement, they're lacking that year of instruction and what they do in class when you're in person. those textile skills, they're lacking some of those. So our teachers are doing a wonderful job of loving the children and connecting with them. But I also went to a high school yesterday, and we have this, what we call this summer boost program. We have over 13,000 of our students going to summer school, which is a record number for us. And I say that because they are struggling to talk to one another. Yes, they're wearing their mask, but our students are very quiet. They're on their device quite a bit, and we understand that. That's the world that we live in, and certainly this past year. But when you hear from teachers and you see the students, they're pretty quiet. So we need to continue to kind of explore that area and see what else we can do in the area of social emotional and support. And we have a lot of counselors that we've hired, additional counselors that we've hired to provide some of that support. Anyhow, I'll stop right there, and I'll have one of my colleagues jump in.
Okay. Well, on my screen, I see Dr. Ruth. Jennifer, would you like to share your equity kind of driven decisions that you've made so far?
So I'm going to say with the questions on the screen of are you ready and is your district ready? We felt like we were starting to get ready back in March, children back on campus in a hybrid model. Bringing children back that hadn't been on campus, we saw were just described in that children, even though they were together, they were facing forward as if they had a computer screen in front of them, even when they didn't. The rooms were quieter than I've ever seen. Having been an elementary and a middle school teacher, my class was never that quiet. We then rolled into our summer session, and we had what sounds like such a smaller number, but for us, a big number of 1,000 children who went to summer session. And as we designed that in-person summer session, it was designed around the social emotional and the academic learning loss mitigation. And so what we truly looked at was being able to reacclimate our children to school, those social behaviors. For a year and some months, they were able to get out of their seat as they wanted to. They were able to do what they wanted to do and how they wanted to do it. And now being back in class, it was that reacclimation and talking with teachers and walking in the classrooms. Our teachers that really committed to teaching summer school saw that as the beginning of the healing for our children, and they enjoyed being able to reacclimate them. And we know, in spring we had 25% of our children on campus, and starting in just a few weeks, we'll be back to hopefully close to 100% of them on campus. And that's not only changes for our kids, but it's also looking at the social emotional needs of our staff coming back as well. Mm-hmm. They have their own things that they've gone through over the last 15 months. And so being able to welcome back our staffs, being able to that they are back, that we are caring for them, and knowing that will again filter down to our children and bringing them back, and similar things to what everyone else described. But looking at our counseling support, hiring social workers for our campuses. We've extended our school day for kids for an additional 10 minutes a day, moving ahead, but looking at what we can do to really bring our children back and make them feel normalized. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you, Jennifer. Thank you, Dr. Ruth. Dr. Ruth is the superintendent of Menifee, right? Yeah, Menifee Unified School District. Jennifer, okay. All right. Dr. Stricuerda, would you like to ask the second question? And if the superintendents want to make some comments related to question number 1, feel free to do so as well. Okay.
Yes, thank you. So I know that some of these topics were briefly discussed earlier. Dr. Gomez talked a little bit about racial equity, and so did Dr. Benrostro about racial equity and CRT. But I'm thinking, what are some of the critical issues that you believe your school community is facing? And then when you're thinking about that question, who are they most affected by, and how would you find solutions for these? So in addition to like racial equity, another hot topic lately is crime and punishment and defunding the police. So I would like to call on Mike McCormick, if you would like to speak on this.
Thank you. Yeah, I think, as was mentioned earlier on, the conversation of critical race theory and what's happening with that, and how does that interplay with, ethnic studies, for example. And, kudos to my Board of Education. They unanimously voted to initiate ethnic studies as a graduation requirement a couple of years ago.
Wow.
And really, there was a couple of things that I think we were all hoping to accomplish through our students' participation in ethnic studies curriculum. And that was really like, this is an opportunity for our students to get to know themselves better.
Mm.
And I think also through that, getting to know themselves, maybe be able to empathize a little bit with their fellow classmates and community members, because I think what they come to understand is that there's a lot of different people and different groups of people who have faced struggle. So we're really excited about that. And for us, ethnic studies is really about, at least the way we think about it, it's really to provide the opportunity for our students to learn about the groups and the peoples that have contributed to history, that have been absent from those traditional books and curriculums. And ideally, and the way we think about this is that, for example, if we're 75% Latinx, then when it comes to ethnic studies, 75% of the stories and things should come from that Latinx. And likewise, because the students, they find this to be extremely meaningful. In fact, we just had the chance to reconnect with one of our students who's now at UCLA. And he said, of all the classes that I took during my experience in Val Verde, the one that prepared me most for my success at UCLA was my ethnic studies class. And so we look to hear more and more stories about that. And so then the other thing that was kind of teed up there for me was, we are proud of doing a lot of things first in Val Verde. And so we were the first school district in Riverside County to create our own police department. And again, we set out with a couple of simple goals. One was we really wanted the first experience, the first interaction between law enforcement and our students to be a positive one. And secondly, kind of at the other end, like at the upper grades, we've got a very robust Explorer program and career and technical education classes that are centered on public safety. We were really hoping that a larger percentage of our students would consider a career in public safety of some type. And so I'm proud to say that, our chief just got back from the National Association of School Resource Officers Conference, and we were awarded Model Agency of the Year. And, so I kind of try and think about it in these kind of straightforward terms, because we know from the community conversations that this is a very divisive issue. There's people that believe very strongly that there should be no police presence whatsoever on our school campuses. And there's other people that believe there should be some sort of interaction. So I'll turn it over to you, Dr. Lawless.
Real critical issue right there.
Yeah, there's a couple of big ones. I mean, Heidi was coming right at it.
but you've been to our school safety, where we have law enforcement personnel and school leaders come together. This will be our fourth safety symposium, maybe post-pandemic, hopefully. It's happening.
Yeah, no, and I think there's I think there's value in really thinking about how these decisions impact the communities that we serve.
Always. Yeah.
And I think, the best quote I heard, and it's very much in line with some of the thinking I've heard today from some of the colleagues here, is that, and this comes from Dr. Chris Emden. If you really want to know how your system is operating, you should take an interest in interviewing the very students and parents that you have pushed out of your system. And I've really taken that to heart, because I think that's how we do learn. And we're able to maybe see some of those blind spots that we were not aware of. So thank you for giving me the opportunity today.
Well, we have not heard from Alan Musarino and Mauricio. I'm sure they wanted to share their own experiences. Two very successful superintendents as well. Who wants to go first, Mauricio or Alan?
Sure, I'll jump in here.
Okay, go on, Mauricio.
Yeah, thank you, Alan. Appreciate it. Well, thank you, first of all, for the opportunity to be here, and thank you for all the stories that my colleagues have shared and the challenges that they're working through. And the two pieces that I wanted to add is of what Redlands Unified School District is focusing on is, again, piggybacking on the idea of, yes, we need to bring students back and have them feel like they're part of our school system again, the way it was prior to the pandemic. So you've heard me talk about in years past about having the schools plus two philosophy here in the Redlands Unified School District. So we're very much focused on making sure that when kids return, that we are connecting all students with two activities and two adults on campus, so that they start to re-engage themselves as part of the community. With the kind of higher level students, what we've been working on currently with our new, and I'm very proud to announce this, our new coordinator of equity and diversity. We are attempting to create those safe spaces where students can come together and talk. And our students, as we all know, are much more courageous, responsible, and professional about having these conversations. And we are going to learn from them, Mike. I absolutely agree with what you shared. And we're hoping that these spaces become the norm, that students know to gravitate to these opportunities so that we can speak and hear. And those of us that are the decision makers listen to what our constituency, meaning our students, really need from us. The other piece that I want to share, I want to piggyback on Dr. Ambrosia. Thank you for telling your story. Beautiful story, and what a role model you are, an inspiration to all of us. But you said something that every kid has a story. And that is something that we've realized as we've worked with our new coordinator over the years. So we're putting together, as part of our digital storytelling program, something that we call the Sawubona Project. As you know, Sawubona, definition of that is I see you, I hear you. And we're going to provide every student in the Redlands Unified School District, if they so wish, the opportunity to create their movie and tell us their story, so that they can share their stories with their colleagues, and we're no longer seeing each other with all these labels that address negativity or make us feel inferior, but see us as people. Who are we? Where are we from? Why are we the way we are? And what are our goals and aspirations? So those are two things that the Redlands Unified School District is focusing on moving forward.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Mauricio. Alan, Dr. Musarino from Alvord.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Lawless. And boy, what a pleasure it's been listening to everyone, inspiring, aspiring as well. The critical issues that we are facing are all over the board. We have our homeless and our food insecure. We have large population. We had an event this past Saturday through our Albert Cares Foundation, and we had a mile of cars coming for 5 straight hours, where we were providing food, school supplies, shoes, sneakers, all kinds of wonderful things, thanks to the kindness of our community. Lots of donations. So we have that issue, and that, of course, is Maslow's hierarchy. So, we always talk about pyramids, of course, and we always talk about the MTSS. We can't get that off our minds, but it's really been Maslow's hierarchy that we've been focusing on in Alvord. The issue of CRT and what it actually means is something that we've been tangling with for some time now, because we've been studying our institution really since I got there 4 years ago in Alvord, really looking at who it is that we are and what does institutionalization mean. In other words, what is it that we institutionalize and what is important to our organization. One of the things that we all learned from the pandemic, being in people's living rooms and people being in our living room, was these socially constructed realities and how you could overcome those. Because as we all know, we have these ideas and expectations about children, and they usually live up or down to whatever those expectations are. So we've had a lot of discussions the last year revolving around those realities. We all have our biases, obviously, so we have been confronting those biases and asking ourselves those questions, where those blind spots are. CRT, I have a portion of my community, the most westernmost side that borders with Sam's district, where they identify very much with those who are very outspoken about us teaching CRT implicitly. And I'm very clear with our messaging. We do not utilize CRT directly as far as teaching it, but we certainly look at our organization through that lens. And we have long studied our A through G patterns. We have long studied our discipline practices. We're not shying away from CRT because it's quite useful to help us in the challenges that we face in Alvord. We have spent most of our dollars committed to the pandemic on building teams at each school. So our elementary schools have a numeracy specialist, a literacy specialist, a coach, a counselor, and a principal. So 5-person teams at each of our 14 elementary schools. Same thing at our high schools. Of course, there's just more of them at our high schools. So we are going to be looking at our children from day one through a very, very different lens. We recognize that for our families who are struggling right now to put food on the table, they're struggling now to decide to send their children to school or not. Education is kind of the least of their problems. So we are doing our best to provide that support. Again, our Saturday program and many more in the future will be focused on that exactly. But again, this is really for us to help our managers, our staff, everyone associated with the organization to look at our children in a different way, knowing that they may very well have experienced adverse conditions over the course of the last year and a half. Many have. We also have overcome some of these stereotypes. Many of our teachers and staff had some ideas about the way children were and how they lived, and they saw it quite differently. So it's worked in both ways. But more than anything else, again, it has provided everyone an opportunity to pause and think about their own socially constructed realities and how they influence their leadership and how they influence their interactions with our families. So we will continue to treat our children and our families with the same dignity and respect that we always have, but we certainly are going to be much more mindful whenever there are children experiencing some problems that otherwise we may think is just kind of being a kid, and looking at it just a little more carefully. So with that, Dr. Lawless, I am happy to continue in this conversation as we move forward.
Very good. What struck me is your whole notion of socially constructed reality. I think all of us, right, should be thinking about what that means, and because it's deep, and I'm sure it will it will, influence the way we treat all kinds of topics, including CRT, or even the whole notion of, do we wear mask or unmask? All the socially constructed reality that Dr. Masurino is talking about is really very, very important. All right, Dr. Strickwerda, the next question, please.
Yes, so we're going to talk a little bit about building hope. How can we be proactive and intentional in building hope, knowing that many students and their families in our communities have experienced social collective trauma as a result of the social isolation and hardships they have faced during the pandemic? So if hope was an issue pre-pandemic, it's definitely something that needs to be discussed post-pandemic. Dr. Vitale, would you like to comment?
Yes, if I successfully unmute, I will speak to that. Great. So one of the things that we're very excited about, because we actually understood that a lot of things were lost, physically, emotionally, so much lost during the pandemic. And so we believe that we all needed to reconnect to really our purpose and what brought us to education as educators, so we could provide that space that we all endeavor to provide for students, that is safe, that is loving, that is affirming, that is inclusive. So we wanted to start with our staff first, because honestly, it was very, very difficult. And I'm sure my colleagues will agree. That was, professionally the most challenging 15 months of my career. The beautiful thing about it is that it was a collective challenge, and I wasn't alone in that. I had colleagues around the country that were having these same exact hard conversations and hard choices and hard decisions. And it was very rough on board members, very rough on superintendents. It's just a very difficult time, and very rough on our educators, our nutrition services, everybody. So we need to acknowledge that and find a way to come back. So what we decided to do here, we've created what we're calling a Rising Strong Symposium. And it's to reconnect with the joy, love, gratitude, and purpose that brought us to education. And it's a conference that we're doing internally for our classified, certificated, and administrative staff. We've invited all employees to do a call. We did a call for proposals. So regardless if you're a teacher or a nutrition services, a bus driver, if you have something that you want to offer to our staff, you are invited to participate in that. And we're focusing on health and well-being, and data, of course, because I don't know, can you have a conference without data? I wish we could, but data, whatever that means in the small and big terms, equity, and teaching and learning. But the whole focus is to reconnect with our joy, love, gratitude, and purpose. And so that's offered to all of our staff. And if they're not on a 12-month contract, we're paying them to be here. So that's one way that I think we're reigniting hope and purpose and love for this work that we do. And as a district, we're really proud to be continuously focusing on diversity, equity, and inclusion. Like one of my colleagues, we just recently created that position, and it's board approved, and now it's in play to continue our equity work. Very proud of the work that this Board of Education has done around equity and affirming educational situations for kids, and all the way from updating board policies to have the most inclusive language for our LGBT students, gender nonconforming, very inclusive language. We did an affirmation back in the spring of last year on Black Lives Matter to affirm our support of our Black students and our Black community members. So they've been very active as a Board of Education to make those policy level decisions and to give us that foundation from which to do this work. Like some of my colleagues, we too have an ethnic studies course that is growing in sections at our high schools. We're very proud of that. But even beyond that, we're working very diligently to enact the Fair Education Act, which passed back in 2010, Fair, Accurate, Inclusive, and Respectful Act, where really this education around inclusiveness needs to be happening K-12 in our schools, so that kids do see themselves reflected in the curriculum. And we've curated those lessons, and we're ensuring that those are taught in our classrooms. So any little kid, however they identify with their gender, with their ethnicity, whatever it is, they're going to see themselves reflected in our curriculum. And we're very proud to be extending that. So we think all of those things with the foundation of, honestly, inclusivity, and just affirming that no matter who you are, what you bring to the table, how you are, whatever the thing is, that we love you, you belong here, we want you here, and we're going to include you. And even those folks that have diverse opinions, as you know, we all know that the democratic process is part of what we engage in, whether it's once a month, twice a month, 3 times a month with our board meetings. We need to respect and acknowledge what people say as their opinion. We still want you here, even if it's a different kind of, this is being recorded, so I'm going to edit myself right there, a different kind of opinion. But the bottom line is to instill hope. I think we need to ensure that people understand that we love them, they belong here, and we want you here, and we're going to include you. And we're going to show that in our words, in our actions, and most importantly, in our curriculum and our decision-making.
Dr. Vitale, you're always been inspirational since I know about you as a teacher, as an administrator, and I was a superintendent. Thank you. And your program, like ethnic studies, you're dealing with Fair Education Act, and your inclusivity. I think those are things that many of us should learn from or talk about it in our own school district. That's fantastic. Thank you. Okay, anyone else who wants to share something about what's going on in their district with regards to this question of hope, dealing with stressed out education, dealing with trauma?
Dr. Lala, this is Sam here. I'd like to jump in with something that, you know, with more and more our communities, our parents are asking for transparency, and a lot of these programs that my colleagues are speaking about, that Julie was just talking about, we need to, one of the things that we're doing, and I know it's being done across all the districts, is this whole notion of messaging, the good work that's taking place, because in this world of social media and parents wanting more and more transparency. By the way, I apologize for the echo. I'm not sure what's going on there. So my point is that we've been very strategic in message, reaching out to our families so that they can hear really from the district on a regular basis. So just this past year alone, we had 98 videos that we did to reach out to our families and let them know the good work that's taking place. Again, just like what Dr. Vitale was describing, I think it's more critical than ever before, especially, as I said earlier, with the various forms of communication that are where our parents find that their news. So I think I could just think of one example with right now in building hope. There's in the area of mental health, and one of the crises that's out there is this fentanyl. Fentanyl is killing thousands and thousands of children and adults out there, and in an era of a lot of isolation that's taken place, we personally have lost several children, and so we're really being proactive in developing a campaign on that. I'm sharing this as an example. So really reaching out to the community again through social media, through videos, but also having like a community forum and giving parents some where we talk about hope, giving parents and being proactive as a district, reaching out more than ever before, because as we all know, our students and our teachers. They need support and engagement more than ever before. So anyhow, those are some examples. Is the whole communication division. It's so important nowadays.
Thank you, Dr. Benroso. Superintendent Arellano, would you like to respond?
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that. Piggybacking on what Sam brought up about the parent, I know we've talked about the students and what we're working with our staff, but one objective that we have in Redlands this year is putting together what we're terming the Equity Roundtable. And we have a very diverse community in the Redlands Unified School District. And so we are purposely creating a safe space for our diverse parents to be able to come and, as Dr. Charest said, to be part of the decision-making process of our district and to hear their input. So you had heard me mention earlier about our coordinator of equity and diversity. We've developed 9 objectives that we're going to focus on as a district. And again, kudos to the Board of Education because they were very supportive of these objectives. And one of them was find a mechanism to bring the diversity in our community together as one and hear from them and ask them to help us in that decision making. So we're very excited of that prospect. It's still in the very first parts of the formation, so I don't have anything to report as to saying here's what it looks like yet. We're in the process of planning how we're going to communicate it, how we're going to invite people, what the meetings are going to look like. But I think that goes very hand in hand with the issue of hope. Hope for kids, hope for our staff, and also we have to include the parents. Hope for them as well. And we hope this is the avenue that allows for that opportunity.
Superintendent Arellano, Heidi?
Okay, next question. How is your district dealing with learning loss or learning acceleration to meet your diverse students' social, emotional, and academic needs? And I would like to call on Superintendent Jennifer Root.
All right, Dr. Root.
Thank you. I think that this is a pertinent question to all of us right now in that as we're moving forward and bringing children back to school, we still need to assess where we truly are as school districts and where our children are from when they left us in March of 2020 to where they are when they return in August of 2021. Throughout the school year, I think all districts, including mine, worked really hard at ensuring that we were still doing our traditional instruction, that we were still continuing to do small group instruction, addressing differentiated needs that students may have, pivoting away from some of our traditional assessments to interim assessments that we could provide to know that our children were still making growth and how much growth they were making. But as we move back, some of what we've already started to do is really look at, one, we started with our summer school and getting children back as soon as possible. I don't know that we looked at that as much as learning loss, as much as reacclimation, and really pivoting them to get ready to be ready, better ready to start in August. We're working on really redefining our MTSS process to ensure that we have standard processes across our district of what are the various tiers of MTSS, what are the interventions that we have for children to be successful in these areas, so that they're able to do looking at it through an equity lens as well. So I believe that we're really looking at trying to determine where our children are, what are their specific needs, and then gearing what we have to meet those needs to be able to mitigate as much of learning loss as possible as quickly as possible. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Root. Dr. Mercerino, would you like to respond to this question about learning loss or learning acceleration?
Yes, thank you. We too targeted our children over the summer. We identified all of the children by virtue of their last assessment in the spring and really push their families to get them in summer school. We provided a comprehensive summer school program, 3 hours of academic instruction, 3 hours of structured play, and we did it at all of our schools. So we had a record number of children, about half of our elementary age children participate in that program. So that's how we got to start with it. As far as the next school year, as I mentioned earlier, we have pods. We have academic and wellness pods, the 5-person team, all full release, that will be focused on identifying children soon, and then deliver support without isolating those children. So the challenge is going to be, how do we meet the needs of those children without targeting them, without pulling them out of the normal school day? And that, of course, is a challenge that we're dependent upon the school. We're leaving it up to our school teams. We're also targeting our children who we have less time with. So the older the children, the closer they are to a transition, 6 into middle, 5 into middle school, 8 into high school, and then our primary learners, knowing that we have less time to get them ready. So we are looking at being able to continue with this program for at least 2 years, and we're looking at it over that stretch of time. There's only so many hours in the day, of course, for the youngest of children, so you have to look long term. But again, it will be a matter of identifying the children soon, immediately, and those who aren't coming to school, because we have at least 500 or so who have signed up for our virtual or distant learning program, and many of those children have high needs. So we are looking very carefully at how we're going to address their needs. We have a large population of children who really are challenged to learn in many, many different capacities, be it language or a learning disability. So again, we are targeting our children in a very positive way, and trying to do so in a way that does not make them feel as though they are not getting the school experience. Because of course, all of our children have missed out on the school experience the last 15 months. So we are trying to really take a balanced approach. And obviously we want to catch our children up as much as possible, but we also recognize that the socialization, particularly for our youngest of children, is going to be just as critical. So we have lots of moving parts, as all of us do. And again, we recognize that we first just need to provide a stable environment. We need regularity. We need safety. We just need our children to breathe. We need our staff and community to breathe. So we could look at this as any constructivist would do when you're faced with the challenges that we're all faced.
I'm sorry, Dr.
I went to question number 5 because of time, and question number 5 is more, I think, will challenge our superintendents to respond to this question. Question number 5. I included an image of a glass, a reference glass, and I know Dr. Moserino has just mentioned a couple of those good ones. You mentioned constructivist, you mentioned socially constructed perspective. And so in question number 5, if Dr. Striquerda can post it, I wrote here, on several current controversial issues, such as race, CRT, LGBTQ, ethnic studies, and others, how do you plan to elevate our community's socio-political consciousness while bringing the community together? I was not going to ask this question number 5, but because I'm hearing all kinds of good ideas already, you're not afraid to deal with this topic. I have a little phobia because as a school board member for 25 years, I receive all kinds of letters from this side of the spectrum to the other side. So now I think this question can be handled by you because you're already talking about it. All right. Anyone who wants to start with this?
Yeah, I will. I'll get us rolling. You know, communicating these issues with our community is critical, because obviously the narrative will be controlled by others if we don't control it ourselves. So it is critical to get out front, and we have attempted to do so by virtue of engaging all of our families that have addressed the issue, asking questions about whether we'll be teaching pronouns or whether we'll be teaching CRT. So I'm responding to all those families. And we have a board meeting in late August where we also expect to have the topic on the agenda. We've had a number of families who have asked about it being discussed. So we will bring together many of our staff members, a member of our community as well, and engage in a meaningful discussion about it. But we recognize that we're not going to change people's minds. What we want to focus on is getting people to decenter. And most of the work that I do in my night job at Cal State Fullerton in our JEIE program is on just that, decentering. We need people to at least recognize what our responsibilities are and how to see things through different lenses, because I think everyone could agree that we want our children to see things through multiple lenses. These conversations are more challenging in some communities than others, without a doubt. And the challenge, of course, is to have these discussions in such a way that you don't appear to be condescending or talking in academic language. So it's so important that we are very, very careful semantically with the words we choose and how we're going to present this information in such a way that everyone could understand it. But just like any other issue we've ever dealt with, and I think I'm probably the oldest person of anyone here on this in this Zoom room here, but we always deal with it, right? We have a board policy on controversial issues. This isn't the first controversial issue that we've had, and we always do the same thing no matter what it is. We listen to the voices of our children, of their parents, of our community members. People just want to be heard, and they have the right to be heard. And our responsibility, of course, is to listen. So we've been through this before, and I think the best way for people to be heard is to provide a variety of different platforms. And we use a variety of platforms, from surveys to my favorite, the Thought Exchange, to just emailing in response to a Sunday night message that I send out religiously. But go to the people. We talk about hope, and everyone loves that concept, but hope's not a strategy. So we don't want to hope people come to us. We want to go to them. So we're going to actively pursue that. I'll be going out on kind of a town hall type tour through strategic visioning, which we're in the process of doing right now as an organization. As I mentioned, we started this work some time ago, looking at institutionalization and really what it is that we are and what we represent. And as we all have looked at systemic racism and other components of our organization, we hearken back to the days of structural functionalism, and the foundation of which our schools have been built. And I know Dr. Lawless has talked about this. I've talked about it with Dr. Lawless and others on the Saturday morning board meeting chat. We're fighting history. We're fighting history. So we have to make sure that we land on the right side of it this time around.
Very good. All right, thank you. All right, well, we can just go around the circle here, and I want to hear everybody's ideas so we can learn from each other. Right?
Sounds good. Dr. Lawless, I'll jump in. Just following up on what Alan was saying, I certainly agree with all those ideas and thoughts that he has and kind of action plans that they're doing in Alvord. Great job, Alan. I just like to highlight a couple of things. Yeah, we also developed a strategic plan over the last 6 months. But I think what's important with that is we've had thousands of folks participate, from parents, students, teachers, support staff, community folks. And I say that because we should not vary from that, especially remind our folks that if they have some thoughts and varying opinion, absolutely participate, be part of the process and participate. And I think that our strategic plan is real clear on issues of equity and inclusion and our LCAP that's included there. So we'll continue to message that out. But I think we need to stay together. And one of those, I'd like to just highlight another thing is I think it's an important piece with the diverse opinions that are out there is reach out to our service clubs, reach out to our faith-based organizations, because they're vital partners. And we've had a long-standing relationship with them. But I think with today's arena of a lot of emotionality, I think it's important that we as a district continue to reach out to them and listen to what they have to say, because some of these thoughts and some of the are actually coming from there. But so I think it's important that we continue to be those long-standing partners that we've always have been, and reach out and listen to our folks. Because we do have a strong community, and we have lots, as I said earlier, lots of faith-based organizations, and within our various, we have 3 cities as well. And I think, for example, I was talking to one of my colleagues today, our Asian population is growing tremendously. So we need to reach out to them, especially our Mandarin community, reach out and because there's such a critical component. But it's not just them, I'm just highlighting them. But so reaching out, I think, is a critical piece that we need to continue to do more of as we move forward.
Okay.
I'm happy to jump in at this point. I'm relatively new to Menifee, having been here only about 9 months. And I think the most important thing with these controversial issues is, first off, is to not think of them as a box to be checked. I think too often we think that we're going to complete something and check it off our list and it's going to be done, where these really controversial topics are topics that are going to be longstanding and need to be woven throughout our district over weeks and months and years. Our district last summer, or a year ago, put into effect a board decree for an equity committee. And as we started it in January after I got here, one of the things that we really learned was we needed to get our internal partners, our administrators, our teachers, our classified staff on the same page with what our definitions were, what we were defining, what we meant. And so we've spent about 6 months working with Dr. Charles Brown through our COE on how to start those conversations within ourselves. So we've been able to come together and look at board policies, creating an equity statement for our district, which was just board approved this month, as well as be able to start into the deeper work, which is the community and the curriculum and the instruction and the implicit bias. We really had to make sure that our foundation was strong. And so as we reach into any of these critical issues, it's making sure that we have that strong foundation so that as we involve external folks, like Sam explained, that we know where we are so that we're giving a clear, concise message as to the work we want to do so that we're not creating confusion within our community and undoing the work we know we need to do. Thank you.
Up on that, Jennifer, because I couldn't agree more that you need to start from within. And for 3 years now, we've been engaging in this work. Soon after I arrived here in Oceanside, and we pretty immediately took applications for what we are calling our Culturally Proficient Educator Committee. And we had more people who wanted to be involved than we could possibly have on a committee, which was a great sign to begin that work internally. And like I mentioned before, one of the things that they were responsible for was curating the FAIR lessons so that we could offer those K-12 to all students. But they've also, we partnered with CTA to provide implicit bias trainings to all staff. And CTA did that free of charge for us, for our staff, not just our teachers, so that we could begin that work, understanding our own selves. But then we need to broaden that out, right, to the curriculum. We've also increased our libraries by over 25,000 books in our various libraries, so that kids could see themselves reflected in various books within the library. I think Edwin talked about that earlier and how important libraries were. The kids need to see themselves reflected in the books that they check out. So we work very hard on curating that list and providing those resources for kids. So for us, and I can give more examples of the work that we've done, we're going to continue that work. Our focus is on creating an inclusive learning environment for all students. And we're all different for one reason or another, and that's a beautiful thing. But we need to name it, we need to appreciate it, we need to value it. And again, beyond words, beyond training, get it into the curriculum, get it into the conversations. And, you know, when we really talk about meeting people's needs, you know, California's done, I'm so proud as a state that they're providing meal service to all students. And that's something that's in the budget and going to continue. And so that's a need that the state of California has decided to meet for all students. And so I think our work as educators, and California does do this through policy and through Ed Code, is they want to provide an inclusive environment for all students. And it's our work in our local communities to ensure that that happens. And it's still not happening in all districts in the state of California, but that's something yet, I'll say yet. But as Alan said, it is our work locally to do those difficult things. This isn't the first difficult thing we've all dealt with. It isn't the last. It's just what's in front of us right now. But it's extremely critical because we have the opportunity to ensure that that students feel represented and see themselves represented, and by proxy, their families will be included, the community will be included. So I'll just say we're going to continue doing the great work that we've started and focusing on inclusion and belonging and affirmations.
Yeah, and Dr. Lallis, I'll just really echo what my colleagues have shared with you today on this topic, on this question. Our goal is going to be to communicate, as Alan said earlier, is there's so much misinformation and so much misdefinition of many of the important topics because people are reading wrong information on social media or the headlines on the news that misrepresent truly what the story is about. And so a lot of people don't truly understand a lot of the important topics that we're hearing here about today. So we are engaging once again in the opportunity to go out and educate the community. As Alan said, or I think Sam said, as a superintendent, I'll be out again talking to Rotary, talking to Kiwanis, talking to faith-based groups, talking to anybody who wants me in their realm, and sharing our multi-year purpose that we vision that we put together years ago in 2017 called the RUSD 2025 Excellence for All Students. And one of our commitment statements, which again, I was very proud of our board because at the time it was unheard of to actually have one of the commitment statements say equality through equity. And we need to remind our community that our definition of equality is that every student will get the high level of education that they expect from the Redlands Unified School District. But the equity piece is that we're going to provide the support and resources that children need who come to school with less for reasons beyond their control. And that's what Julie was talking about, right? That focus of inclusive excellence across the board. Our board members are in the process of committing to putting together their in trustee areas here in Redlands. So they want to have town hall meetings where they invite and engage and have those two-way conversations with their constituency about these topics so that we do have an opportunity to listen and learn, but also for the community to listen and learn. And like Alan said, let's move people off their center point and help us come back to that point where we can talk about opposing views and try to do what's good for the whole community instead of one view versus another. The other piece that I'm very proud of is our continued work with our partners, such as the University of Redlands, such as with Dr. Martinez and Dr. Lallis, where we have come together and brought networks of colleagues to talk about these difficult issues so that we can learn internally and then be able to model how we learn and how we have those discussions using that concentric circle model when we go back out into the community or even back out with our students. So I think those are important pieces to this conversation. We, as probably if all of our colleagues have mentioned, we too are working with a consultant, Nicole Anderson. I'm sure some of you know Nicole. We've done a 3-year contract with Nicole. Amazing individual who knows how to frame these conversations, keep the conversations from spreading into areas that don't concern the topic, and keep us focused. So I highly recommend any of our colleagues watching. It's good to come in and have somebody who has that expertise, because as much as we think we know, we really tip of the iceberg, right? And when you get somebody like Nicole in there who really opens up these doors and windows and strategies and tools and thinking about the history, Alan, that you talked about, that we have to really dig deep into and understand what was the history of public education and understanding what that means for us as leaders right now in terms of making changes in education is key. And so I just want to commend my colleagues, and I feel really validated that we're doing a lot of things that all of you are doing. And I respect you guys all greatly, so I know I'm on the right path. So thank you guys for sharing your stories. It makes us feel validated.
Dr. Lawless, if I'm just listening to our superintendents, and I just wanted to jump in as our time is ending here, but just to say there's really a lot of great thoughts and important messages that our superintendents are sending us. I just wanted to add that from a School of Education perspective as a dean, I do think that for us, one of the things that's critical is that we look inward at ourselves, at our current state of how we're thinking about DEI. What are our assumptions? Are there sort of assumptions that we have about ourselves that, maybe others don't have about us? We really need to take that strong internal look, and the School of Education will soon release DEI, first ever DEI report, where we do as best we can to understand our current state, because we too are susceptible to assumptions and things that we think we know. And we need to get that report out there and get feedback from our stakeholders, including our partners here today and others, so that we can truly grow in terms of how we think about diversity and DEI sort of issues. And where we can't measure everything, but things where we can measure, like, for example, we have found with data that the number of Latinx students that we intake in enrollment is not equal to the number of Latinx students who graduate 2 years later. Now, I know that sounds very basic and simple, but it's important for us to document that and claim it and work with our faculty and staff to say, this is something that we probably need to address. And so I guess my message is just, that it's very important to work with our communities and with each other, but also to take a serious look collectively and collaboratively inside and within ourselves.
Wow. Thank you, Dr. Martinez, my dean. And, from what I'm hearing from the superintendent, my head is really spinning. I've been a school board member for 25 years, right? 25 years, that's a lot. But we always think of success stories within ourselves, internal to us, K-12 internal. I'm inspired from what I'm hearing here, because you're not only concerned about the K-12 education of students, but we want to go external, because as we elevate the knowledge, abilities, and skills of our students, what I'm hearing from Dr. Maserino, Superintendent Arellano, and the rest, and Vitale, all of you, is that we need to elevate the awareness of our community as well, right? Hundreds of letters and emails that I'm getting shows that as we feel good about our K-12 education, I think, to be honest, I think the community is really lagging behind in terms of how aware they should be. And this pandemic just elevates that feeling of, I'm a parent, I want to be involved. I want to say something for the education of my children, school districts, board members, what are you guys doing? So it elevates that to the point that they almost want to have a real strong say about the education of their kids, which is we want high parental involvement. But are we ready for it? Do we have good strategies to do it? And I hear some good ones. I heard Equity Roundtable, right? You're doing that, Equity Roundtable. We have ethnic studies. We even have owned our police department. I heard something about inclusive language, love, joy, purpose, gratitude, focus on diversity, not staying on a box to be checked off, but it's a long-standing struggle. There's a lot of good things that we really can learn from each other. And I really appreciate all of your input. And I hope that we continue this partnership, even with information sharing that we do every year. As Dean Martinez has said, this partnership must be strong. K-12, School of Education, the blending of theory and practice. So I just wanted to read this last slide. It says, critical issues in education produce differing views. And therefore, critical thinking, examining evidence, and reasoning is vital to our democracy. I would like to end our webinar by really going around again and give your words of wisdom to the audience who are listening to our webinar right now. Yes, your own words of wisdom that you want to leave to us, educators who are attending, who are listening to you, our superintendents.
I'll start. I actually have seen a huge silver lining within the pandemic and what we've endured over the last 16, 17 months. And that I think it reminded us why we came into the field of education, and it was to be about children. And I've seen that within my teachers, administrators, our classified staff. And so as we bring our students and our families back into school, it's important that we keep still alive within us of the joy we have of having them back, but also being able to balance that with knowing there are such important needs that have to take place. These children didn't ask to miss a year and a half of in-person instruction and all of the social components that come with that of Boy Scouts and Girl Scouts and athletics and clubs. And so what can we do as organizations to be able to fill that gap as quickly as possible, because we have a moral imperative to do so. Thanks.
And Dr. Lawless, I'll just jump on the end of that comment by Jennifer. And let's also remember that, kids didn't stop learning. They still learned. We all learned over the last 15 months. We learned a lot. We learned a lot as individuals and as a collective group, right? So we know that kids kept learning. So let's just continue to focus on seeing kids and the assets that they bring to the table, because everyone has a gift and something special that they already have that we need to develop. So let's remember that they were still learning, being, and amazing people. And so was all of our staff. And so just like she said, reconnect with that purpose, with that beauty, that joy, and approach kids from that assets mentality. You can't lose when you see the good and the beauty and the greatness in people. And remember always to include everyone and be as inclusive as we can with our language. And that's how we connect people to our systems.
Sam, I'll defer to you.
I'll take a stab at it. Great job, ladies. When we talk about the diversity and the pieces that are out there, the diversity of thoughts, I like something that I heard recently in sports metaphor, which is, sometimes when we focus on the past, our ego gets in the way. We've done this and we've been very successful. And then, when we plan a lot of things and we're looking in the future, our pride gets in the way. But with so many challenges out there, if we focus on humility and act with humility, we're in the present. So that's where I'd like to leave you is with so much out there, let's be present, especially with all of our children and all of our families.
Wow, it's going to be tough to follow the three statements. Thank you, guys. My contribution would be, when we say all means all means all.
Wow.
And it's going to be very important that we don't allow ourselves to be distracted from what we truly believe is the right thing to do for our students in our community. And I will echo Sam, humility is an important trait and characteristics that I like to value. And humility is a big part of that. And we need to be able to, as Julie and Jennifer said, we need to listen. We need to create safe spaces for people to talk, but ultimately with the goal of all means all. So thank you for allowing me to share those thoughts.
Thank you. With a small amount of minutes we have, I just wanted to appreciate Dr. Striquerda for helping me, helping Dr. Martinez for putting this webinar together. We've had many webinars, and we have reached over thousands of people doing this because we love to learn from each other, and we love ideas from people that we invite. And so we thank you for being here with us. Dr. Martinez, do you want to say your parting word?
You're muted, Dr. Martinez. You're muted, Dr. Martinez.
Thank you. I'm sorry, Dr. Lawless. I just want to say the kind of end where I started in saying that we truly believe at the School of Education that we have to jointly own the improvement and strengthening our social, educational, and cultural parts of our communities, and we want to partner with you going forward. So thank you very much for participating. And I think that's it. I think Dr. Lawless is frozen, so that's our signal probably that we're done. So Heidi, thank you very much. And I think if that's the wrap, then we're good to sign off, yes?
Yes, we are. Thank you guys. Have a wonderful
Bye, everybody.
day. Bye-bye.
Have a good school year.
You too.
Bye.
Bye.